Joining me today on Uplifts are members of the 2023 Project Truth team. So thanks everyone for joining me today on Uplifts. Louise, can you tell us a bit more about Project Truth?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having us in the studio, Catherine. So Project Truth is a youth initiative of SPUC. It's actually been running for 10 years now, so it's the 10th anniversary. Started off as sort of monthly stalls and then quite quickly progressed into a road show during the summer. So what we do with the road show is the young people come to us, we train them, people come from all across the UK. We train them up and then we go out on the streets and we just talk to the public about life, the development of the child in the womb, and issues surrounding abortion as well. So it's really good to get those one-to-one discussions because you actually make more progress with people when you're having a one-to-one rather than just being sort of one against a lot of people. So that's the kind of thing. The idea is to change hearts and minds on the topic of abortion, and Project Truth's a really good way to do that.
Lovely, Louise. And so, Jamie, how did you first get involved with Project Truth?
I think like a lot of the people that end up doing Project Truth, their first experience of it or the first time they come across it is at the SPUC youth conferences. So I was fortunate enough to attend the last two in 2022 and 23. And I was kind of considering maybe doing it in 2022, but talked myself out of it, being a little bit more shy back in the day. And I think it was a weak excuse that I had a holiday booked or something like that. But no, this year I kind of, in order for me to sign up for it, I had to kind of detach myself from everything that was going to entail going out and speaking to the public about such a controversial issue. And I had to just go for it. I booked it, I was going on it, and then we'd cross that bridge when we came to it. So it was a slow process, but it was through the SPUC youth conferences initially that I came.
Amazing, Jamie, thanks. And so, Jasmine, would you say the same? Is that where you heard about Project Truth at the SPUC conference?
Yes, definitely. Like Jamie, I went in 2022 and 2023, and I did have a feeling to go in 2022, but I thought, again, kind of like Jamie, I was a bit nervous about it, and the idea of speaking about this issue to other people was very nerve-wracking to me at the time. But the last youth conference in 2023, I thought, you know, it's a good thing to do, and hearing Maria, who was actually on the team with us, gave a talk about Project Truth and her experience with it, and that really motivated me to want to sign up, to really do something active in the pro-life movement.
Great. And so, Louisa, did you hear about it through the SPUC conference as well, or how did you come across?
I think I've actually known about it longer. I think sort of family friends that I've known have done Project Truth. They're older than me, have done Project Truth in previous years, so I'd always had sort of an awareness of it. I remember going to one of the rap parties like quite a few years ago, and so yeah, I'd always had an awareness of it. And then this year, just the summer past, was the first time I was actually old enough to do it. And I was swithering about applying because I was a bit nervous, as the same as the guys have said, but I went for it and really, really loved it. So.
Oh, great, well done.
That's just news to everybody out there that's thinking about doing and swivering, because all these guys had the same thing. And once you sign up, it's always excellent.
And so, Jasmine, how was the start of Project Truth that week for you?
So I definitely would say that at the start I was very nervous. So I remember our first day in Edinburgh, we had a bit of confrontation as we were setting up the stall, and I was kind of thinking to myself, oh, this is what I've signed up for, you know. So I was a bit nervous at the start, but as the weeks progressed, I really loved doing it. I thought it was so nice to have those conversations with people one-to-one on the issue, because I think it's so easy for us to even have misconceptions about people on the other side, and, you know, think to kind of, have those misconceptions, but actually get talking to people, seeing where they're coming from, and then taking it from there, bringing your stance, which obviously is the pro-life stance. So, it was a nerve-wracking experience at first, but then I grew to really love it. And again, it was so nice to be with other pro-lifers too who are doing the same.
Indeed, and that's a good point. You mentioned about the misconceptions about the other side as well. I think it's so important that we get out there and actually have that dialogue with others. And so, Jamie, did you find that your confidence as you took part in Project Truth over the days, that it increased, would you say?
Certainly, yeah. The first few days I was a bit all at sea because it was like an entirely new thing for me. I kind of didn't really know where to look, what to do. The conversations I was having were very stop-start. And one of the things I struggled with was that people weren't as kind of engaged with the issues I thought they were going to be. I kind of had this idea in my head going out that people were going to be coming up to me, throwing arguments at me, and I had to kind of counter them. It was going to be like that fast-paced, but it really wasn't. It was like people hadn't considered the issue for months or maybe even ever. And that was, I suppose that's our job, is to go out there and kind of get the cogs turning a wee bit, just to show, have you thought of this, have you thought of this? So it was definitely, that was something I struggled with. But again, like the confidence, once you've had a few conversations, even difficult conversations, you remember what you said 2 days ago, and it really worked in that similar sort of scenario. And being able to bring that up and kind of fall back on what you've already spoken about was helpful as well. So definitely by the end of the week I was in much better shape.
Great, it's good to hear.
I always talk about the mountain in the middle as well, because I say that at the training. I think it's kind of, you know, you've got really, really pro-life people on one side, really, really pro-abortion on the other side, but then there's this whole heap of people in the middle that haven't maybe thought about it. They'll probably identify as pro-choice if you ask them.
Yeah.
But then when you kind of dig into what are the reasons behind that, you know, so that's the kind of people we're aiming to talk to.
Yeah.
And then with the confidence, one of my favourite things about Project Truth is just seeing, you know that the young people, when they go out, they don't really know what to expect. It's like that anticipation of, oh my goodness, what's going to be happening? And but once they get into it, you know, by the end of the week, they're so confident, you know, but maybe at the start they're standing behind the stall with like a leaflet being like, oh no, don't come and talk to me. But then by the end of the week, they're just out there doing it, you know?
Yeah.
And that's one of my favourite things, is just seeing the confidence. And I think that's one of the most important things about Project Truth, because when the young people leave, they're taking that back into, you know, their daily lives, you know, their universities, their workplaces and things, and they're just much more confident on the topic.
On the topic,
in practice of doing these conversations.
That's lovely to see it. And speaking about universities, Louisa, like what is it like being pro-life at university nowadays for you?
So we have a pro-life society on our campus. It's not a huge society, but I wouldn't say it's the smallest.
But it exists.
It's quite a good amount of people in it.
We definitely have a presence. And I'm in second year now, but in first year I started getting involved in the events. They hosted a lot of talks on pro-life speakers about different issues, which were really great. And then we also organised volunteering at a pregnancy crisis centre, which was weekly, which is so important to actually actively do, like Project Truth, to actively do something about your beliefs. So that was really, really important. And then now that I'm in second year, I'm involved in helping with the social media for our society. So it's definitely, we definitely have a presence, and it's just about trying to bring in people, even if they aren't pro-life, just to try and get them along and have them think about the issue.
So, Jasmine, what has been your highlights from Project Truth?
My highlight, I mean, they've been several, but I think the key thing for me is just having those conversations with people, having those one-to-one conversations. Again, like I said, you know, it's so easy to form kind of misconceptions about what the other side think or what they're like. So it's good to hear from their experiences, where they're coming from, and then taking that forward, bringing that pro-life message to them. So I really enjoyed having those one-to-one conversations. And also I found it very humbling just to listen to other people's experiences. A few women came up to me talking about their miscarriage experience, and just being humbled in that situation, just to listen to them as well, was I found very good. And also to tell people also about the support that is there for women in crisis pregnancy situations, because what I found was that a lot of people didn't know that support was out there. They just thought abortion is the only option. They didn't have that knowledge about other organisations that are there to help women, such as the Cardinal Winning Pro-Life Initiative, which a few pro-life societies get involved with, DPAPS in Dundee. So it was nice just to tell people about that, and they were very receptive to that. So even if they were not pro-life per se, they just really appreciated that there was that support out there too.
That's amazing that you're spreading awareness about them as well.
Changing perceptions as well, because a lot of the time, even if they maybe don't agree with what you've been chatting about, quite often you're sort of changing their mind on how you're perceived. You know, the media are always saying these pro-lifers are horrible, they're doing this, they're shouting at women, you know.
Yeah.
And then they kind of, I think a lot of people are taken back when they see actually we do care, we want to give out, you know, information on help where we can, and, you know, and just having a conversation with us, they're like, oh, they're not shouting at me, they're not what we've heard that they are, kind of thing. So I think that's quite an important aspect as well.
So true, you're breaking the idea that we're monsters or something, you know. And so Jamie, how was like the social aspect of Project Truth as well? Because I know you all hang out as well in the evening time, so tell me more about that.
It was certainly up there with the important work that we were doing. Of course, it's not the main reason we're there. But it was amazing, and for anyone considering potentially doing Project Truth, I would say that's a fantastic reason to get involved, to meet like-minded people that are passionate about doing something about this issue. But in terms of what we did, we would have dinner as a team together every evening. We would have drinks together, we would play card games together. Some were more passionate about that than others.
Some were borderline violent.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, and in the hostel in Dundee there was pool. We played plenty of games of that. We were singing songs together. And it came together on the final evening. We had a big meal in a nice restaurant in Glasgow together, and finished it off really well. And I think everyone got on well together, but many people kind of really made one or two kind of friends for life almost. It was like there was a lot of kind of maybe more kind of special connections made by certain people. They really clicked and got on. So it was good to see that as well.
That's wonderful, Jamie. And so, Louisa, what would you say to anyone out there who's young and it's probably like, oh, I'd like to do Project Truth, but I'm a bit shy or I'm a bit afraid? What piece of advice would you say to them?
I think I would say that every single person that started, like the first day on Project Truth, I think every single person was nervous. Everyone was a bit scared, and the first day can be a bit daunting. And my first day wasn't very successful by any means, but I would just say absolutely go for it, because it's such an important thing to do. And when you get into it, you realise that you're really making a difference. And especially like I had one conversation with a woman who had 2 abortions, and just to like be there and to give her the resources and to let her speak about her experiences, I think was just so important for her to have that chance, because she might not necessarily have anyone to talk about that with. So just to be there for people to talk to, and also a lot of people don't know a lot about the issue, so to be able to inform them and educate them about what the current situation is in Scotland and the UK, and also the social aspect is great. You meet a lot of nice people, as Jamie said.
For sure.
So I would definitely recommend it.
Fabulous, thank you. Well, thanks everyone for coming on Uplift. Really, really enjoyed chatting to you all and getting to know you. So, chat to you soon.
It's always been fun coming out of the studio.
Thanks everyone for joining me today on Uplift. Tune in again next week where we'll have more influential guests for you. And goodbye now from me and the team.
Bye.
delighted on Sancta's Showcase for Life to welcome, not in person but live from Zoom, into the studio, Brendan Thompson, the CEO of Catholic Voices, who's going to give us a fantastic insight into how to handle media, difficult questions about pro-life issues. So welcome, Brendan. It's a pleasure to have you here.
It's great to be with you, John. Yeah, always happy to help Sancta Familia, and this is a really great initiative.
You've had a very busy year yourself. You've run a successful Catholic Voices Telling the Church's Story conference in London in January. I can't believe it's 11 months ago. And you've also had some good news with a new promotion or new job. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I brought Bishop Barron over in February to do a national evangelisation conference, which went extraordinarily well after having been delayed a couple of times. But thanks be to God, it all went really successfully. And Sancta, you and Brian came over to help us to do some coverage and stuff, which was fantastic. And one of the fruits of that really has been I've been, as of late August, been hired as the UK programme director for Word on Fire. So kind of developing, many people are inspired by the charism represented by Bishop Barron and Word on Fire. So just to see what's possible for mission in the UK.
That's fantastic. Really, really looking forward to see how that flourishes. Bishop Barron and the Word on Fire team do fantastic work. Of course, you've been doing great work for a long time. Can you tell us more about your organisation that you're CEO of, Catholic Voices, what they do and what's their rationale?
Yeah, sure. So, we've all been in the position, right, where someone says or implies like, oh, you're a Catholic. I'm like, well, that's a bit odd. Why do Catholics believe X, Y, and Z? And the feeling that engenders. And I would almost say, like, sometimes being pro-life is harder because it's like, oh, you believe that can really far right wing, viewpoint, or, you hate women, or whatever the kind of associations are with it. So Catholic Voices was set up in a way really to try and give Catholics in particular confidence when it comes to speaking about really essential issues, often hot button issues when it comes to the church. So abortion, but also other issues related to the church. So Benedict XVI comes to the UK for a state visit, lands in Scotland, comes to England, and we train a group of lay people, say we need these people to be the sharers of the church's story, not just, let's say, professional Catholics, but actually these are skills. This is communication. This is evangelization that the laity are called to by virtue of their baptism. So in a way, it's to try and give Catholics confidence to be able to do that. So it's been going since the papal visit, about 13 years, in the media, but also in workshops. I
can't believe it's 13 years since the papal visit. I'm now feeling very old. I think you're the same age as me. I don't know if you feel similar, but it's been really, really important to have that lay voice, because in regards to hot button issues like abortion, like euthanasia, the things that are perceived as controversial, why do you think that the media home in on these hot button issues and not focus on the other softer but also equally as important issues?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question about what makes news. So I remember someone gave a definition of like, news is something that somewhere someone doesn't want something to hear about, like that you don't want to hear about something. So for us, let's say that there's, whether it's kind of like buffer zones, the conflict and the tension. Conflict is quite interesting, tension's quite interesting. So the news, in a sense, it's trying to give a sense of the pulse of culture, and often the things that do generate awareness, clicks, engagement, whatever it is these kinds of controversial issues. So often they're trying to get different perspective voices as a way of trying to understand issues, to use media language and language we use in Catholic Voices to frame an issue. Issues are quite complicated. The issue of abortion, the issue of pro-life, pro-choice, all of the views around it is quite complicated, and we need to be able to simplify it to understand it, to behave in a particular way. So the media, when it's doing its job well, is trying to give you the different facts, the different things, the information that you need about stories as a way to understand issues simply.
So what would your advice be to, say, pro-lifers who are running a small pro-life organisation? That we have Spuck who do some basic media training with their staff, but there's other people who maybe are running a pro-life stall, running a pro-life raffle, or small scale events, and they might be interested in local media or national media. What would your advice be on approaching that topic, especially with a hostile media?
Yeah, so I think sometimes because the issue is so important, you almost want to go in on the most extreme stuff. But in a way, like, I think there's a kind of, let's say, a skilling in storytelling that's needed. So it's like, when it comes to being pro-life, what are stories that we could reasonably engage with and build a relationship with local media? So I speak to people who run local radio stations all the time. So let's say BBC Local, wherever, and they're increasingly actually being amalgamated. And this is there's a distinction between legacy media. So that's been the apostolate of Catholic media. So let's say BBC, Sky News, Al Jazeera, which, has a particular purpose. And then there's also new media, let's say. So you guys, going on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, whatever it is, whatever your platforms are. Now, when it comes to legacy media, it's quite an interesting opportunity to think, okay, what are some stories, like local stories, pro-life stories, like crisis pregnancy centres? What a particular, I often find, and these are one of the messages that I have in the back of my mind, is that when it comes to a worldview, people can tend to be quite pro-choice because they think that's what the nice people do. Nice people, normal, sensible people are pro-choice. But if you scratch under the surface, they tend to be pro-life in the details. So kind of pro-choice worldview, pro-life in details. But in order to have those conversations, it does require a bit of vulnerability. It's the art of learning to have a conversation. So in a sense, the last 10 years of my adult life as a Christian has been, when I came to a conversion, I was conscious that it's hard to explain. I was there just, like, say, a while ago, but it's hard to explain now what I see, that I see things so differently, that I feel things so differently. So how can I help someone to see what I see? How can I help someone to care about what I care about? And in a sense, what I can give a particular perspective. So say, like, as we say, going into media or these kind of longer forms of dialogue. But I should say probably at the start that it's really good to have a showcase for life, because there are actually lots of different types of voices. And I think we should be quite generous in a sense. Like, somebody doesn't do something the way I would necessarily do it. So sometimes we need blunter instruments. So think of John the Baptist, who was quite a blunt instrument for the kingdom of God, very, very challenging, really out there. And Jesus had that element to his ministry as well, like, Pharisees, you brood of vipers, or, changing over the money. So there's this place for that righteous anger, especially with this issue. There's also other types of communication. Like, so sometimes it's appropriate to run away. Jesus legged it when he was in, when he was in his hometown of Nazareth, and, they accused him of blasphemy. So there's lots of different types of approach. I guess the type of approach that I'm advocating, or the results of it that you might see in the media, or I train people to do, is saying, okay, what is the result of a kind of deep listening and the insights? How can it make our communication more persuasive? So the ultimate goal is actually, I want to try and persuade someone.
Yeah, as I was saying, there is not this binary choice of you're pro-life, you're pro-abortion. There's a kind of, as some of my colleagues say, there's a mountain in the middle where the majority of people, as you referred to there and touched upon, are somewhat lukewarm on the issue, somewhat in favour, somewhat against. One of the great outreaches of SPUC and the things that they do is something called Project Truth. We've heard about that today. They go out onto the streets and they just discuss the development of the baby in the womb. So it's not the hard issues, it's just simple scientific facts. So you're talking about what a baby's like at 12 weeks, what it's like at 16 weeks, 24 weeks, and just discussing those issues. One of the things I see about the pro-life issue is that there's two elements to it. We as Catholics have a spiritual view of it. The vast majority of people don't have a faith, we would say, or don't practice a faith. How do we convince them from not just a spiritual point of view, but even the scientific point of view, because we have a scientific understanding of when life begins?
Yeah, so I think the thing I like about Project Truth is that there's an opportunity mindset to it. So if you never think that you're going to be able to talk about it, you won't, because you'll never see opportunities. It's, it's like the red car theory, right? How many red cars did you see on the way to work? Well, if you weren't counting, you saw none. But if I could give you £100, I'm sure you'd see them, you'd be able to tell me with quite a lot of accuracy. And often when it comes to this issue, we need to expand our toolkit and our creativity and the things that we can speak about. So sometimes, often in television programs, there are quite pro-life themes. It's like, oh, did you see that show? What did you think of it? Well, actually, the thing I thought about is very interesting. You know, we need to find excuses almost to have a conversation. And as you say, it's not necessarily when we're doing Catholic Voices, we're trying to find common ground. There's no dialogue without common ground. And in a sense, I want to begin with the values, or at least begin with a value that another person, you know, what is it behind what they're saying? What can I appeal to in what they're saying to start there? Because if there's no common ground, there's no dialogue. So I'm not going to use the Bible, I'm not going to use the catechism, I'm not going to use the tradition. Where it's appropriate, I will. But if it's not a point of commonality, particularly with the abortion issue, there is so much different scientific, biological, cultural data and stories. It's more often than not, it's like, how can we find excuses to share stories about this? And a story looks different. It's not just like a beginning, middle, and end. Sometimes there's a story that's told with a particular fact or statistic, around prenatal care or antenatal or postnatal care, or experiences of somebody going and having an abortion or something like that. So we need to become conveyors or better at being storytellers in lots of different ways, I'd say.
One of the things that's interesting about the reaction to holding a pro-life view is there's this extreme element, you could say, who will never accept any hint of change or movement or even adaptability on the pro-life issue. We've seen a few examples of it this year, which I'll get into. But even the smallest things that the SPUC do, for example, like the Alma Mater Fund, which is on the surface a fantastic help to pregnant and parenting students, to help them get through a degree whilst being pregnant and having that choice. There's some opposition to that as well, who see that as having an agenda to promote this pro-birth ideology that's used by the other side in this debate. But even more sinister, you might have noticed a difference in the last 12 years of being with Catholic Voices. Has there been a shift where we're seeing, as we've heard today from some of our guests, real cancel culture? Come to my mind is the candidate for the SNP leadership, Kate Forbes, who we'll hear from after yourself. Kate was vilified for holding Christian views. They weren't explicitly pro-life views, but they were Christian views, and the press refused to see anything beyond her Christian faith and how that coloured her campaign. So do you think it's getting harder these days with this growing increase of cancel culture?
Stories and narratives change, right? So what could have been in previous generations regarded as abortion is kind of unfortunate, so we want it to be safe, legal, and rare. That could represent a previous viewpoint, but that's not generally speaking the viewpoint now. The viewpoint is more like abortion is healthcare. So this is, we need to notice that shift. So if abortion is healthcare, it's not something as a kind of, you're feeling reluctant about. It's actually something to fight on behalf of, because you see that there's people being marginalized and it's a human right. And so in a sense, as there's that, it becomes in a sense, an ideological banner or a weapon, in a sense. So I do see that. And I guess, in a sense, cancel culture, because it's a fascinating one about cancel culture, because free speech does need to come with a corresponding sense of responsibility, right? So you can't just say whatever you want. I think that we all believe in limits of free speech to one regard. But I think this sense of anything that makes people slightly uncomfortable. So it's like it's gone to the opposite extreme, a kind of mollycoddling, which actually makes, so one of the difficulties, I would say, actually, which is why we need a kind of opportunity mindset, is that it's considered beyond the pale. So it's actually like, this isn't a normal part of conversation. This is far right, or it's very extremist, kind of, to even entertain the conversation. So in a sense, that's why we need to be more, in a sense, subtle, intelligent, clever, as well as sometimes, and I guess for other voices, and I agree that other voices do need to be a bit more, in a sense, more bold, a bit more radical, a bit more. So we need those mixture of voices doing those things simultaneously. And when it comes to someone like Kate Forbes, let's say on the political dimension, she's coming after the watershed moment that was Tim Farron, right? Who got this article. So asking people about their kind of deeply held religious convictions. It's funny because I think in that case, it was possible for Kate Forbes to be in a political party and not really have spoken about faith. Like many people, you can faith lives in a kind of hermetically sealed, element, and so can this kind of view. It just lives there. It's like, oh, it's okay as long as it's very inert and it lives there and it doesn't do anything. So it's the distinction. So in a sense that I actually think it's probably a bit more honest that it did come up in conversation of saying like because it implies who you are and your beliefs do actually affect your leadership, which is right. We just think it's going to be affecting it for a good reason, not a bad reason. So I generally agree that some of the things underneath cancel culture, the sense of the integrity of living, I can run with and say that I don't think it's a reason to kind of cancel, because in doing that we actually kill a pluralist culture. It's like, we're kind of fighting for and the majority of pro-life people, it's not like they're trying to eradicate, in a sense, like who is the side trying to eradicate difference or eradicate difference of views, and it's not the pro-life side.
Absolutely, that's very salient points. We're going to be hearing from Kate Forbes after yourself, and she'll be reflecting on the campaign and what it was like to face that barrage of criticism. But what gave us hope, Brendan, was the fact that this is not a party political broadcast for the SNP or Kate Forbes, but in terms of a candidate with a deeply held Christian view, that she came so close to winning the leadership debate. I think it was something like 2,000 votes against Shumza Yusuf. So it gives us hope in the Catholic world, the pro-life world, that those views, although a silent majority or a maybe vocal minority will be abusive and shout out and try and cancel you down, the silent majority will, at the end of the day, side with you for the integrity that you've shown, despite not sharing your views, and that's the best way society should be. So thank you, Brendan, for coming on tonight on the Sancta Showcase for Life. I'm sure we'll be meeting up again and bringing you more content from your wonderful work that you do across the UK and beyond. And I hope you and your family have a wonderful Christmas when it comes. Advent is coming very soon.
Thank you so much, John. Prayers for everything you're doing, and enjoy Kate Forbes, guys. She's great.
Thanks very much. So thank you for that, Brendan. And stay tuned. And coming up soon, we'll have our interview with Kate Forbes, MSP.
The Society for the Protection of Unborn Children is working to make abortion unthinkable and to ensure that precious unborn babies can go on to live happy, healthy and rewarding lives. Every unborn baby saved, every mother helped, each of these things will echo through eternity. With courage, clarity and kindness, SPUC will never stop speaking in defence of those who cannot. Please, unite with SPUC now and become a link in the chain courageously battling to end abortion.
The Alma Mater Fund is really important because it gives women tangible financial help while at the same time progressing and pursuing their academic studies.
When I was pregnant at first, it was the biggest shock in my life. I was not expecting it.
Pregnant and parenting university students are vulnerable to a great number of things while at university. Many of them feel as though they have to choose between finishing their degree and having their child. According to the NUS, 11% of student parents report having enough money to cover their expenses, and 60% of student parents have considered dropping out at some time during university, and that number goes up to 65% when you consider single parents.
The Alma Mater's Fund was so helpful in helping me get things I wouldn't have been able to afford, like cots and prams and all the little things as well. You don't realise how much money it actually costs to have a baby, but it really helped me out, yeah.
And so there's clearly a need there to support pregnant and parenting university students. And often universities are hostile environments to having children. Children and parenthood is not something welcome on campus. And so in response to that need, SPUC Scotland established the Alma Mater Fund to help alleviate some of the financial pressure, as well as to signpost to women the various places where they can get further support to continue their studies and have their children.
When students contact the Alma Mater Fund and I can speak to them directly, it's a very personal link, and I'm able to talk directly with individual students, get to know the women who may be helped practically by Alma Mater grants. Just chatting with them on the phone gives me a better insight and makes me more aware of the difference that the grant can make to their lives.
So to other students, I would tell them that you can do it, you can definitely get there with a baby. There is support out there in the university and charities like the Alma Mater Fund. Yeah, baby. Aha, yeah, you can have a baby, can you?
Mama! The Alma Mater Fund is currently restricted to Scottish universities, but it's our hope to expand to universities across the UK, as well as to students in other types of scenarios, whether it be college or something similar. Now, of course, there are 10 times as many universities in England as there are in Scotland, so that's a huge task ahead of us. But we're really hopeful that we'll be able to extend this support and this helping hand to empower more women to both pursue their degrees and have their families.
You can actually get through it, and I love her to bits as well, yeah. It's just, you guide me through it, don't you? Yeah, I feel like she's like my motivation now to actually push on and get my degree and get a job out of it as well.
Hello and welcome everyone, it's great to be back.
Well, I enjoyed the talks were really good, and also friends here that you don't get to see.
It's been absolutely incredible. I've met some amazing people, we've heard some great speakers, very smart people with lots of great stories to share, and it's been a very hopeful weekend for the pro-life community, and I think we've all taken away some very positive messages to go back to universities, go back to work, and start spreading the pro-life message again.
It's great to see everyone again. I was here last year, so everyone's always super friendly. Nice to see some new faces as well, make new friends.
The atmosphere's unreal. Like, I came here like 3 years ago for the first time, and I knew nobody, and like everyone now, like even they're so friendly. Like, I've made the greatest friends from here, and it's honestly so good. No, it is. It's really good atmosphere.
Well, it's my first time to Spark Youth Conference, and it's been very welcoming. The talks have been very inspirational. I think it's been good.
It's been an absolutely fantastic conference so far. The people have come from all over, even as far as Spain this year, which is fantastic.
Fantastic weekend. We had such a variety of speakers I enjoyed, such as Josh and Margaret, who spoke on the reality of course abortion. So over 170 young people were equipped by SPUC here.
I always enjoy being here and having the community, because you can always feel so alone when you're back in your normal life and you just come here and you remember there's so many people that your age.
I was actually here last year and it's been amazing. I thought it was going to be like, oh, same thing as last year, but no, it's been completely different, and I would definitely recommend to every single person to come for it next year. I won't be missing next year, so I will definitely be here.
The theme of this year's conference is essentially coerced abortion is abuse, so it's highlighting to the young people the reality of coerced abortion.
The speakers that we have just been absolutely fantastic. We wanted to focus a little bit on coercion this year, and how important that is to
bring up and highlight. So we have had some fantastic speakers on that topic. We also had Josh Bram over from the Equal Rights Institute in the States, so we've been wanting to bring him over for a while now.
Highlight of the conference, definitely Josh Bram, internationally renowned pro-life speaker, and he was giving us lots of advice about how to kind of pick apart our own arguments, kind of take them back to the principles of them.
I've really enjoyed the talks. They've all been really informative, really exciting, but also just building up pro-life community. I think it's so important, especially at the minute. It feels very, especially in Edinburgh, we've had a lot of opposition over the past year, and so meeting up with other pro-life people and seeing the bigger picture has been really, really uplifting.
We just had our King and Queen and TikTok champions of 2023 at the Spuck Youth Conference, and these guys got the most views, got the most likes, and it's good. They didn't know each other before this weekend, and here they are now sharing the spoils of their good work.
It's always a great opportunity to get young people together to learn and to get to know each other and to create that sense of pro-life community.
Just really inspiring to meet so many young people of a similar mindset and ready to change other people's minds.
It's wonderful to be at the 2023 Youth Conference and to have so many enthusiastic young people listening to such inspirational speakers. They really are being educated, they're being empowered, and I really believe that they will go out and change our society to make it a pro-life one. So yeah, I'm delighted to be here, and SPUC is really pleased with how this event is going.
So thanks very much, Brendan, for that wonderful workshop there. We're now going to hear from Kate Forbes.
So thanks, Kate, for your time today. It's good to see you again. And from being our TVs very much in the last few months over the campaign trail. One of the reasons we wanted to talk to you today is because in our mind, this weekend we're celebrating mothers and babies, and you're probably the most high-profile mammy in the country. Would you agree with that, perhaps?
I think it's certainly the most vocal mummy in the country, reflecting probably the fact that I have a very vocal little 15-month-old girl who's growing up very fast, increasingly naughty, and as I often joke, looks like her father, takes after her mother, which is the worst of both worlds.
I would agree with that, for your husband's sake as well. But going back to the birth of Naomi, you were very upfront in recent months about your struggles with postnatal depression. We were quite moved by your honesty about that. But is that the fact it was a news story, does that not still indicate there's a stigma around postnatal depression?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to be upfront about it was that whilst I was experiencing it, I was really taken aback by the fact that so many other mothers I spoke to could identify. And yet it was such a shock to me, which suggests that there is very little public discussion about it. And it shouldn't come as a surprise to a lot of new mothers. But the other thing is that I wanted to sort of pay credit to those that are on the front line of helping new mums with these issues. And I really can't cope almost listening to the experiences of mothers across the world who don't have the same level of health care that we do, and so on, and yet have to grapple with these issues, not least in the Middle East right now. So I really felt a desire to talk about it, to elevate it, I guess, out of the shadows, and perhaps start a broader debate about what we need to do to support new mums.
Of course, what makes it more remarkable is the fact that just a few months after that, we've got the sudden resignation of Nicola Sturgeon. You decide to throw your hat in the ring for leadership with SNP and First Minister. What was that like to decide on entering that campaign, given all that happened?
Well, on one hand, it felt like it was the wrong time to be going for a big contest like that. And yet I think actually my earlier experiences had completely prepared me for it. It had certainly crystallised for me what is really important in life and what's less important. So, as you know, I created, perhaps to put it mildly, a bit of a stir in the early days of that campaign. But I guess coming out of that experience, it felt so important to throw my hat in the ring and to actually try and deliver a better future for everybody, but particularly the next generation. I felt like I had a personal stake in a better Scotland, and therefore a responsibility to do something about it. So, and then it also crystallised for me the importance of being honest, of being truthful, of not winning a contest on the basis of hiding my views, but being open and upfront. And I think those early experiences certainly did, for me, to use that phrase again, crystallise just how critical it was to go for it, but to go for it in a way that was honest and truthful.
Yeah, we'll discuss later on more the specifics of the kind of ferocity of the campaign and the experience, but just before that, it's worth reflecting on the fact that pregnancy is a protected characteristic. You being a pregnant professional at that time, before the campaign, do you think there needs to be more done in law to take away some of the discrimination that maybe pregnant women face in the workplace or in society?
100%. You know, I was doing quite a high profile, quite time intensive job. I mean, I spent so much time travelling the length and breadth of the country, extremely pregnant. I didn't stop work until maybe 48 hours before I actually gave birth, and I gave birth a week late. So I was already into borrowed time and still working. And you know, when it came to maternity leave, I was really keen to set a standard for what perhaps future women in my position would be expected to take. I didn't want it just to be sort of a couple of weeks. I wanted it to be a proper period of maternity leave. And I think that I found a lot of people that I was working with were really understanding, and a lot were just less understanding. I mean, doing factory tours as the economy secretary and not being able to sit down for 4 hours is pretty hard going when you're pregnant. And you know, been very conscious of the health of my unborn baby as well. So I think on one hand it's understanding, on the other hand it's legislative protections, but ultimately I think it's the extent to which society reflects its value of the baby. You know, we are facing demographic challenges, we're wanting to improve equality protections for women. And all of that comes down to how we also support the unborn child.
Of course, I mean, just on that point, you mentioned about the demographic challenges in Scotland. You know, we are facing a very low fertility rate. How would you envisage the government, the Scottish Government, could help boost or encourage families to have more children and, you know, grow family life?
Well, having tested being a working pregnant mother, I think that it comes down to, first of all, the employment protections of women, and things like being able to get time off to go for hospital appointments, time off to go in order to rest if that's required. I think we need to have stronger employment protections for pregnant women. And I think, secondly, we also need to be able to demonstrate, almost model, the fact that it is possible to be in work or whatever and have a baby. That you don't need to wait perhaps until you're at the top of your career because you're so scared that there will be implications of being pregnant. So I think that that's the other thing I'd sought to achieve, is that modelling of it. But thirdly and lastly, I've never had a better job. I love having a baby and watching her grow and watching her develop. And I'm so grateful that in this line of work I was afforded the opportunity to have a baby and to take maternity leave and then come back to work.
That's wonderful. One of the things we're raising the awareness for SPUC and their campaigns. One of the things they do, which is wonderful actually, is something called the Alma Mater Fund, which is basically there's pregnant and parenting students at university who find themselves in a crisis pregnancy, unwanted pregnancy for speaking sake, and they feel that they can't continue their degree. So what the Alma Mater Fund does is it gives them the support, signposts them, gives them some sort of small grants as well. So that kind of touches upon the idea, and that's one of the things we're promoting this weekend. So I don't know if that's something you know about or maybe are interested to hear more about, but that's kind of struck in my mind there when you mentioned the fact that we need to help people in work, but also students as well who maybe have ambitions to study, but also have found themselves in potential motherhood.
I wasn't aware of that fund, but I think that it's so essential that we support mothers. You know, we absolutely need to support mothers.
Yeah. So going back to the campaign, it's nearly a year now, I can't believe it already. We as Catholics, Sancta Familia, Catholic media organisation, you're not a Catholic yourself, you're a member of the Free Church of Scotland, but we share so many of the core beliefs. So when you stood up for yourself to be First Minister and head of the SNP, it gave us a great shot in the arm as Catholics in this country who very often feel that holding traditional views about your faith, deeply held views, sincerely held views, somehow precludes you from being elected or standing up in a public office. Were you surprised by the backlash you got initially from colleagues, the media, about the fact that you're a member of the Free Church of Scotland?
No. Very predictable and not very newsworthy. What I think was remarkable was the backlash to the backlash. So what are the chances, when did it last happen, that you would have had unity across people of a Muslim faith, a Catholic faith, a Protestant faith, of no faith, humanists, secularists, feminists, all united around the notion that conscience should play a part in our politics, and that today it might be, for example, people expressing concern about my views, and tomorrow it might be something else, and that actually a liberal democracy can only operate when we stand by those freedoms of speech, of religious practice, of religious view, and so on and so forth. So actually, what I found remarkable and hugely heartening was the backlash to the backlash. And I think there was quite a lot of people that were surprised that I got 48% of the vote amongst SNP members. And interestingly, generally retained a lead when it came to public polling across Labour voters, Tory voters, SNP voters. And I think that's the big surprise, and hopefully is a source of encouragement to those that feel like the public square is an increasingly fearful place.
Well, it was a great shot in the arm for us. So on behalf of us Catholics, thanks for standing and speaking up so boldly on those topics. One of the things you mentioned there is free speech. For us Catholics, we have a very strong commitment to helping women who find themselves in crisis pregnancies, unborn children, and that very often manifests itself in every Lent. There are occasionally prayer vigils held outside hospitals in Scotland. I know there's a kind of several groups who are against that for various reasons, and there's a bill coming up in Parliament here for proposed buffer zones. One of the concerns that us Catholics have is that it's been implemented in the UK previously in smaller areas, and it's led to the arrest of individuals for simply standing outside an abortion clinic or a hospital and being accused or arrested on the thoughts that's in their own head. Now, let me be very clear. We do not stand for intimidation, harassment, and there's certainly been no evidence of that. Video evidence, recorded evidence, police evidence of that. So do you really think that this is a necessary bill?
Well, the bill is currently, as I understand it, in the Health Committee. So it's really important that every piece of legislation, including a bill like this that touches on so many of our enshrined freedoms, that it is properly scrutinised, and that the committee and then the Parliament take the broadest number and diversity of views on the bill. I think there are some really important points here. Firstly, I do not think that you can ban prayer. So I think that silent prayer is essential, and that is an important freedom to uphold. I think also, though, you cannot protect harassment and antisocial behaviour. So that should be banned. And I think this bill has got to get the right balance because, of course, in some of these clinics, people are going for a whole host of different reasons. And it's important to protect their freedom to access that care, as well as protect the freedom of those to pray in a peaceful way. So often legislation in this Parliament boils down to binary options of yes or no, being in support or against. I think this bill is going to have to work really, really hard, listening to a broad number of views in order to ensure that it is a product of a liberal society and not an illiberal society.
Absolutely agree on that point. I think we're seeing increasing pushes now to silence not just this topics but other kind of faith topics as well to the periphery. So we're hoping that if any particular bill comes in, it won't do that and particularly penalise people of faith. In particular, regarding to laws protecting women. And one of the things that was quite interesting recently and very sad was the case of the woman who was sadly killed not far from here, Fazia Javed, she was called. There was no additional charges for the death of the 17-week unborn child that she was carrying at the time she was killed. Do you think that the law is sufficient to protect women and their unborn children, and is there any scope for better protections?
Well, I don't know enough about that particular case to comment on the legal arguments, but what I have noticed, and I think is absolutely right, is an increasing push for recognition of the untimely deaths of unborn babies. And we've recently seen, for example, the introduction of ways of recognising babies that have died through miscarriage, and the absolute sort of anguish of parents who want to recognise that baby's life. And I think, therefore, it's an interesting question as to how the law can reflect that anguish. I mean, seeing some of the newspaper coverage of the anguish of grandparents in that case, and wanting to acknowledge that there was a baby there, there was a life there, and that the death of the mother led to the death of that baby. So without commenting on the legal specifics, I do think that there is a desire to recognise in greater sort of substance the untimely deaths of those babies.
And finally, looking towards the future, in recent months, the SNP, you could say, has been a bit of a hot water with regards to some defections from the party. You've got Ash Regan, who's defected to Alba. You've had Lisa Cameron, who's defected to the Tories. Do you still think the SNP is the right party to lead Scotland forward? And if so, do you still harbour ambitions in the future to be potentially a future leader for the SNP?
Well, you heard it here first. I ain't going anywhere. I'm here to stay. Because I do think that the SNP still can be the national party of Scotland. It's the Scottish National Party, a party that reflects all of our communities, including faith communities, and is able to have a debate and a diversity of views reflecting all these different communities, whether they're in the Highlands or in the Central Belt or in our islands or in the Northeast. But we need to strive to protect that. And I certainly see I have a responsibility to do that. So for as long as I am a member of the SNP, I want to be a voice for perhaps the voices that aren't heard as often in the SNP, and hopefully give that hope to communities that sometimes feel more distance from our national parliament. So yes, in terms of the future, I have said that on one hand I have no desire, no appetite, no ambitions to stand, and the only reason I don't rule it out is that you can never predict the future. But for now I'm very content with the job that I have, which is being on the backbenches, representing my constituents, but representing those diverse voices in a way that I hope is sort of conducive to a proper debate. So not just saying it's my way or the highway, but actually engaging in discussion, and that sometimes means compromise as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Kate Forbes, for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
So that concludes our Sancta showcase, our very first ever Sancta showcase. So we want to just say a massive thank you to everyone here, all the Spuck staff, to Fala Brown especially for accommodating us. And a big thanks to all you, the viewers, and everyone who's donated to this great cause.
And on that point, you can still donate. Our donate link is still active, and it will be in the future as well. So you can still continue to donate. And if you want to donate to Spuck, you can send a cheque to Spuck as well. Some people were asking that in the comments. So that concludes our marathon 12 hours broadcast today. We've been here since 8 o'clock in the morning. It's now time for pizza and some more games, but not live anymore. We're just going to have fun ourselves. So thank you everybody for coming. Thank you for supporting us. Thank you for supporting Spuck. And more importantly, please continue to pray for an end to abortion in this country. God bless.
Thank you. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.